Hello to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find the Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review the program. I'm your host, Wayne Liu. I'm joined by co-host Blake Murphy, who is engineering something off screen. Do not pan to him just yet.
No, we're good. We're good. I just
okay.
wait to take I got it hidden by a water bottle and stuff.
Got you. Blake, how you doing, man? You all right?
Yeah, I'm good, man. It was a fun night in the NBA, but a little bit of a depressing one injury-wise, including with a little bit of Raptors news. If anyone missed it, Jakob Poeltl's out tonight. I'd imagine, given how early that was announced, that he's probably not playing tomorrow either.
Yeah.
But no news on that one yet. And then in addition to, of course, the Ja Morant being done for the season, he got the Norm Powell in practice, a subluxation of the shoulder.
Right. Yeah. You think he's going to come back wearing T-shirts like Norm Powell did for the rest of his career?
He might have to. Shout out to, what did Alex call Jonte yesterday? 11?
11?
Shout out to 11.
Yeah.
Although that's just like a plain baggy tee. That's just like a Hanes out of the bag
fair enough.
tee underneath.
That's actually
that
all I
one.
hoop too.
And then Tyrese Halliburton obviously straining a hamstring there. It sounds like he avoided a more serious one. Woj reporting shortly before we came on that an MRI revealed a grade 1 hamstring strain. So reevaluated in a couple weeks here. That one, of course, a little bit more relevant to what we talked about, what we touched on yesterday, and we're going to talk about today, which is, what is now that we've seen this team for a couple games, what is the upward mobility of this team? How do they stack up? And the Pacers would be one of those teams in that kind of next tier. Before we do that, how are you doing?
I'm doing okay. It's officially gone to the point where the weather is cold enough and there's enough precipitation that I can't scooter, at least to the subway. So now I have to take the bus.
You don't have snow tires on it?
Unfortunately not. So no, but everything's fine. What was I going to talk about? Yeah, so I think there's like a real sense of optimism with our current team right now, which I haven't been able to say about the Raptors in at least a year and a bit. Not to say that the trade fixed everything, but I think the early returns are pretty positive.
Yeah, it depends, I guess, where you're gauging that. There were some optimists who really liked the Jakob deal last year and thought that opened up a lot, even though they only won a couple games over 500 down the stretch there. And certainly I was in the camp of Jakob makes sense basketball-wise, not trade cost-wise. But I don't know. I think the damage had been done on the sort of excitement last year.
There was that one game Jakob had last year where the Raptors played the Magic, and he had like a 30-piece. It was 30 points, but it was just like in typical Jakob fashion.
That's what made the Magic go out and be like, we got to get Goga Bitadze. We can't have Jakob Poeltl going off.
Honestly, I don't think that they're completely unrelated. But I think the additions of Emmanuel Quickley and RJ Barrett to this team have just put them in a level where, at least in the 4 games that we've seen them work so far, they're offensively, it just looks a lot more cohesive. And I'm thinking,
and the numbers back that up.
Yeah, right. And I think that dating back to what Masai said last year, when he said at the end of the press conference, at the end of the season, he said, I did not recognize this team. I did not enjoy watching us play. I think a lot of that was coming down to sort of how inert the offense was. And so change the coach. Now you see 2 new starters come in. Maybe we'll see more changes as well. But even before they make more changes, I just wanted to ask you, your impression of this team going forward. Their record is what it is. They're still, I believe, 5 games under. And 6 games under. So,
this is how optimistic and excited you are. You're already giving them fake wins.
If they'd only didn't blow 6 games this season that they shouldn't have, including that Pistons game or the last time they played the Jazz, et cetera, the Chicago game 2. But yeah, where do you see this team currently in terms of value-wise, in terms of just how good they are in the Eastern Conference? Let's put aside the record just in terms of their quality of their roster.
I do just want to note on the record, of course, we could put it aside for this discussion, but there were some indicators that, and look, I know everyone got pretty tired of it and it was the same issues over and over again. If you dig in a little bit under the hood, yes, the Raptors were not on the tier of, those top 8 teams in the Eastern Conference, but they had, their win-loss record relative to what they did from a net rating standpoint, what they did relative to, how many big leads they got or how many big leads they dug out of and stuff. There were some indicators that this team was a little better than they'd played. They just had, for whatever reason, the starting lineup would struggle for a huge amount of time, or, anytime you kind of multiplied a couple of those ill-fitting bench pieces together, the bench would get rolled and stuff. And you don't, that doesn't keep you warm at night. You don't get a cookie for that. But it does inform, that this trade was really a 1-for-2. And I'm sorry to Precious and Malachi for that, but
No,
like
it's
they were
fine.
both kind of on the fringes of the rotation. And the 1-for-2 is important, but it's also important to recognize that within what they'd done prior, even though things had been bad, a lot of that wasn't necessarily, well, the 5 or 6 guys you had were bad. It was they were in poor roles or places that didn't fit. So not only are you getting the addition of these 2 guys, Dennis is in a more logical spot. Gary's in a more logical spot. Jakob is better able to be utilized. So I think when you take all of that into account, you look at how this has worked out so far. I certainly think you could, if someone were to say to me, after the top 8 in the East, where if you haven't looked, by the way, 4 through 8 in the East right now are all tied.
Yep.
Deadlocked. All 21 and 15.
Yep.
Then there is a 5-game gap before you get to everyone else. And then it's Chicago, Brooklyn, Toronto, Atlanta. And we'll probably talk about those 4 teams as a group heading into the trade deadline because they're all swing teams. What are they going to do? But we're also going to talk about them as a group because 2 of those 4 are going to get the last 2 play-in spots. If you were to tell me now with confidence you think the Raptors are better than those other 3 teams, I would accept that. They're better than Brooklyn. They're better than Chicago. They're certainly better than Atlanta. Better than Chicago looked with Zach LaVine. They're doing a little bit of their own
I was
weird.
gonna say Chicago's having a real moment right now. Like I think they're like 12-7 with Kobe White leading the team and Zach LaVine being out. So
and now they're trying to work him back in, and the trade stuff's going to hang over that for a month still.
We'll see.
And Brooklyn has obviously underperformed to some degree, but I don't think anyone thought they were going to be more than like a 500-ish team anyway.
Yeah,
they're also a team that should probably look at selling a little bit at the deadline. Like Spencer Dinwiddie and Royce O'Neal are really nice pieces on expiring deals for teams that are going somewhere. Less so for a team like that. Anyway, if you were to tell me you think the Raptors are better than those teams, I would buy it. If you were to tell me that you think on a night-to-night basis the Raptors are going to be competitive with that 5 set of tie teams, Miami, Orlando, Indiana, Cleveland, New York, I would believe that. We've seen them be competitive with Cleveland. We've seen them be competitive with some of those other teams. We've seen them be not competitive against Orlando, unfortunately.
that was rough.
I don't think that you can confidently say, yes, the Raptors are better than those teams. But I think you could say if we were restarting the season now, they could make that the goal. They could aim to compete with those teams. So, that's obviously not shooting them too high. But we're 4 games in, and I still am really curious what it's going to look like when they get tested defensively, like we saw against Sacramento. Like the offense has been way better. The defense has continued to be quite bad, and you lost your best stopper. So all respect to Scotty Barnes and the job he did on Steph the other night and the job he's done individually since OG got traded. But the defense has not been good.
Yeah.
So, I'm holding off evaluation a little bit in that regard. Do you think that's fair? Do you think I'm underselling what this could be a little bit in kind of being a little cautious with the optimism here?
No, I don't think it's. I don't think you're underselling the optimism. I think you're like being pretty realistic about the situation. Their defense, at least in terms of personnel, I still continue to insist that they should be a better team, just in terms of their talent, than what they currently are in the standings. But offensively was my main concern, and I think that on both sides of the ball in this current iteration of the Raptors, can they be a team that is above average on offense and defense? Because I think that that's, to me, like what it would take to get to closer to these tiers. Now, of course, you probably need something to be like your offense needs to pop and be top 10. Is that really possible with this current group? Maybe. Like, I mean, so far they have been. In the 4 games, they have been. But, maybe there's a bit of hot shooting. I think RJ obviously is shooting the lights out, for example.
Chris had a perfect game the other night.
Yeah, Chris Boucher pitched the perfect game, which is not going to happen all the time. But at the same time, like, is there a chance for them to get into the top 10 offensively in terms of just the talent currently on with this core? I'll ask you that too.
Yeah, I mean, I think so. We got asked this in the mailbag the other day about like, is it possible that the identity could swing from the kind of defense first we've seen the last couple of years to offense first? And I was kind of like, I think a more realistic goal and step for this team would be sniff the top 10 at both ends. So I think offensively, I'm not going to crown them yet, but like we talked about yesterday, I think you're starting to see, hey, Scotty and Pascal have been getting all this defensive attention, doing a good job individually scoring around that. But when you tilt it to the second side of the floor or someone attacking a closeout or finding a seam, they didn't quite have the pieces to really take advantage of all that attention that they were drawing. And certainly with Jakob, Louis Atzman had a good piece at Raptors Republic today. And while I, maybe disagree with the calling him terrific or whatever he's been so far. He's been made much more sense on this roster since this trade when you have a lot more pick and roll play and a lot more point guard play. So I think when you look at those things, you can absolutely be encouraged by what you're seeing offensively. And even if the percentages come down a little bit, the process is there. You see what Emmanuel Quickley brings. You see why RJ Barrett is, at least on the offensive end, even without the level of shooting of OG Anunoby, maybe a better fit on this team because of the way that Pascal and Scotty, create defensive mismatches on the weak side of the floor. So I think, and then again, Dennis moving to that bench role, all those bench units have just looked way more competent offensively. And we'll talk to Michael Grange about the great story he wrote at sportsnet.ca yesterday about Dennis's move to the bench. So I think they could, sniff it. I think I would probably, if we reset it today and we're saying, are they going to be top 10 the rest of the way? I would probably bet against it, but I'd put them at like league average pretty comfortably, which is when we were talking about the first 10 games of the season, their half court offense was as bad as the process 76ers that gave Tony Wroten 30 shots a game. I think getting to league average the rest of the way is like a really, really nice next step for this team.
I think quietly, like, you got to give Darko and the rest of his staff some credit here because they have steadily like improved offensively. Like they're right now 16th in offensive rating. Honestly, that's not bad given what the personnel was to start the season. And now that you add in more pieces, I do expect that to climb just a little bit higher. The thing is, cracking the top 10 is difficult. So right now, Indiana's first, best offense in the league by 2 full points per 100 possessions. Boston second, Milwaukee third, OKC fourth, Philadelphia fifth. That all makes sense. Like, there's MVP candidates on all those teams, except for maybe Indiana. You might not say Halliburton's an MVP candidate fully.
He's going to be on some ballots, though, if they finish. Like, they're, 5 games over 500 right now? Like, if they were to finish with 48 wins, he's going to be on some ballots.
Sure. Okay, fine. Yeah, let's give him his respect there. Atlanta, Denver, Clippers, Knicks, Mavericks. Those are the rest of the top 10. Like, it is hard to see the Raptors cracking that group without some sort of elite talent because you can look at those groups like Dallas, obviously having Luka, the Knicks having Brunson, who's having a great year, and it seems like all their supporting guys can really, really shoot. And then Randall's just Randall. He's up and down. I'm not going to give him too much credit, but he has played well in a lot of games this year. The Clippers have Kawhi, who's a robot. The Nuggets, obviously, Atlanta, even with Trae Young. So it is a little bit hard to crack that group, but Raptors are upswinging offensively, and I just think that if they prove defensively, this team, if they kept it together, it's probably like a 40 to 45 win kind of range. And I don't know. I suppose that doesn't guarantee playoffs nowadays, but
it guarantees you the play in at least, and then you see, and we'll have to see over this next couple weeks, whether that is enough of a step forward or whether they think it needs a more dramatic move. The other thing offensively is I still think if you laid this roster out on paper, it's probably still a little bit light on shooting, on 3-point shooting. They've shot better since the trade, certainly.
If RJ Barrett and Scotty Barnes are just above average 3-point shooters, which they have been since the trade, then all of a sudden you don't actually have that work.
We just have such a long track record of RJ being up and down month to month with that skill set. So I would just like to see it a little bit more. Even then, though, one of the things that the Raptors had done before the trade to get back to, they were playing better offense before the trade as well. Now, their defense had continued to fall off a cliff and they weren't winning games. And some of this was strength of schedule. But one thing that they had done really well over the last couple games, and it's something that they've continued since the trade, and I actually think the personnel fits it even better, is they got back to being a top transition offense. And so they're now on the season back up to number 2 in points per possession added via transition, and back up to number 1 in how often you get out in transition. And that was a big thing where when their half-court offense was stuck around 25, 26 in the league, you need those transition buckets so badly. And they had at least started to round that out a little bit. They are up to 21st in half-court offense. They're 24th in things like out-of-timeout sets and things like that. So there is still some progress to be made in the half-court, certainly. But getting back to being a transition-oriented team really suits this personnel, especially with RJ being such a good transition player and Emmanuel Quickley being as fast as he is. I think that's something that, we saw them last year. I think they finished 12th overall in offense, and they were 25th in half-court offense. You can, even though transition, at most is taking up 1/5 of your possessions, if you dominate in transition, you can cobble your way to an average offense. We saw it the last couple of years.
I do think that, to your point, that Warriors game was huge. Like the hit-ahead passes from Quickly to Pascal, those are back. Like Pascal used to just run out for those like touchdown passes like all the time, every single game.
Dwayne Casey told him that like day one. It was like, we'll get you 8 points per game off of beating everyone down the floor in transition and crashing the glass sometimes.
Yeah, he's like,
outlaw.
He's like, I have no place for you, man. Just run. And that actually was an actual talent. But, you're seeing that connection again with him and Quickly. As you mentioned, like, having the multiple ball handlers with RJ being excellent as an outlet option too is great. Defensively, it's actually surprised me to see that the Raptors are like roughly league average defensively. Is there a chance for them to get into the top 10? Because I think, or at least with this group, because that's kind of our expectation coming into the year. And if they've been disappointing on one end, it has been on defense. So can they get to their true talent level of being top 10? Or maybe is their true talent level even a top 10 defense?
Since the start of December. So that is a lot of games. That is almost 20 games.
Yeah.
They've had 3 games where they were above average defensively.
Damn.
In terms of, opponent points per possession. If you are a baseball person, you're talking about a baseball savant page, that's a lot of blue and not a lot of red. Those are the wrong colors you want on your color coin. And they're at 18th on the year, and part of that was like their first couple weeks of the season, they were awesome. And that's kind of where I'm at, up until that Detroit game. They were pretty regularly posting like 75th to 100th percentile defensive performances. Like they were, that Minnesota team didn't have McDaniels, but they did an unbelievable job against that team that's really, really held up well since they shut down, obviously, the Detroits and Washingtons and San Antonios. And those big comebacks against those teams were entirely because you erased them defensively. They had really good defensive showings against Milwaukee. Even the Portland loss was a low-scoring one. So they showed some of that stuff. And I know these are some bad opponents in there as well. But I do think that a lot of the stuff that they started doing poorly on defense is stuff that you can clean it. Like Nick Nurse had a rant last night about the 76ers and their lack of transition defense the last couple games.
I've been waiting for a Nick Nurse call out, by the way.
I think I've had that rant on this show a couple of times this year where the transition defense falling off as it has is tough. And like when you have such a good transition offense, they're not the exact same skill set, but part of what makes your transition offense deadly is, the speed and athleticism and the hit-ahead passing, certainly. But part of it is you force mismatches all over the floor because you don't care who is playing what position. Mm-hmm. Other than Jakob Poeltl, everyone in the rotation can play a couple spots and fill in, hey, you could be the paint fill, or you can go to the corner, or you can be the trail man and run right into a pitch, into a DHO. Like everyone can do a lot of stuff. And defensively, it's supposed to be the same, where you don't really care who picks up who on the way back. Again, other than maybe Jakob guarding a point guard, or now that you have Quickly, you're maybe worried about a little bit about of a post mismatch, at least until he's further down his Drew Holiday film absorption.
Sure.
So I think the transition defense is probably the thing that I'm looking for first, just because I think it's the easiest thing to clean up, and it's the easiest thing that is like, are you paying attention to small details? Is your focus level there? And they had a pretty bad one against Sacramento in that regard. I thought they did not do a good job of that.
To be fair, Sacramento is also amazing in transition, and they hit a ton of threes.
Yeah, and it's something that they did a much better job of against Golden State. So that's that's kind of where my focus is. Look, you lost your best individual defender. You can't really make up for that with adding RJ and Emmanuel Quickly, who are, Quickly's good. We'll see. I think he has a defensive upside that he's still, finding his way into. RJ's fine. He's solid. But they're not OG Anunoby. And as we've seen, Scotty Barnes is capable of being a number one type defender, but that requires you to pull him out of a spot where he's been really, really effective as a backline guy for you. So there are challenges and trade-offs that you just didn't have with OG. So I'm not skeptical about the defense because they were underperforming their talent level so much. But I'm not as sure that is going to come around quickly as I am the offense, if that makes sense.
I never thought I'd ask you this question at all at this point about this team this season, but are the Raptors now a better offensive team than a better defensive team?
Probably slightly.
Yeah.
I
don't mind. Like, I actually don't mind that approach. Like, I think we've seen like defense first.
Yeah.
And not to say that you shouldn't be great on both ends of the floor, but we have been seeing like defense primarily in that driving wins. And like it did lead to a style of play that
Look,
was like so ugly
the
offensively.
Kings are 7 games above 500 and been outscored on the year. You can
Yeah,
win
sure,
playing
yeah.
fun offense. That's probably not the best example of how to sustain it, given how down on the Kings I've been generally. I don't. I think when we answered that mailbag question last week, and we kind of got to, well, the Raptors' next goal should be to get top 10-ish on both ends of the floor. I think my probably intermediate goal right now is, can you be solid and steady, which is average-ish right now? Because before the trade, you were below average at both things, and I don't think that. Look, I don't want to lower the bar too much, but this team with one trade did not become a 55 win pace team.
Yeah.
We got to be realistic about that. So I think, if you could sniff the top 10 offensively and get back to just being average defensively with more consistency, I think that's a pretty good step forward from the way the first 25 games or so went.
Yeah, fair enough. By the way, you mentioned the Kings point differential, so I was curious because, as you mentioned, they've been outscored by 8 points total on the year,
and are 7 games over 500. It's almost impossible.
The Raptors are like literally right below them at minus 25 for the entire year. They've been outscored by 25 total points all year, and the Kings are 21-14. The Raptors are 15-21. That doesn't make any sense.
No, this is Pythagoras didn't know ball, like Sisyphus has no rings. But this is where, at this point in the season, you'd look at something. Basketball Reference has expected win loss in there, and that's what it's going by. Basically, getting blown out by the difference between getting blown out by 20 and blown out by 30 doesn't really matter for projecting it. It's a blow, it's a blow.
Yeah.
But you add everything up over the course of the season, and that generally gives us, and that would be, I guess, another indicator you're looking for if you want to be optimistic about the Raptors, is that among all losing teams in basketball, only the Warriors have a better point differential.
Right.
And that's all just like Wiggins on off quick stuff.
The Warriors have their own subsection of problems.
Yeah.
Which I'm actually really excited to see Draymond return to the team.
Okay, so how do you, like, obviously long term is a bigger question. There are a lot more moves to come, whether this year in the offseason to retooling this thing. But they're 36 games in, so they got 46 games left. They're 3-1 so far, so they'll get 50 games post trade, and that's a nice even number for us.
Well, maybe they'll get that because obviously, the team might get. We'll talk to Grange in segment 2 about potentially trading Pascal.
Let's assume that this is it.
Yeah.
The record over that 50 games, they're 3-1 so far. What do you think a reasonable expectation is?
At this point, if the Raptors can finish above 500 on the year, given no trades or even
so they'd have to go 6 games over 500 the rest of the way. They'd have to go 26-20.
Yeah,
if my quick math is correct.
I mean, maybe, but like I think that that would be a positive or like an actual goal of theirs. It doesn't sound that exciting to the average fan, and it's not something that is even going to qualify you for the playoffs. But I think realistically, given where they are right now on the season, it's a goal that they should shoot for, and that would be actually attainable for them.
It's also, and like, keep in mind here, when, because I know people's instinct will be like, well, it's a lost season, they're out of a play-in spot.
We don't have a pick, so it's
exactly.
I'd actually rather the Raptors win as much as possible.
Yeah, even if you were to, you're not getting to the bottom of the league, you're just not catching the teams at the very bottom. And even if you were to finish 6th last, which is probably the closest and even now after the jaw injury, I don't even know if they could get there. But even finishing like 6th last, you would only keep your pick a little less than 2/3 of the time.
Yeah.
And then you'd have to give the pick away next year instead, which is, depending on who you ask, that draft class is certainly looks stronger. And conveying the pick now opens you up to trade picks if you do that, whereas you can't right now because of the protections on it and stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much about the reverse standings.
Yeah.
Just worry about Detroit to make sure you get that 31 pick.
The funny thing with the team is just like the reason I'm asking this is there was the whole retrospective that Josh Lundberg wrote about the 10-year anniversary of the Rudy Gay trade, and I think what's exciting about that idea was that team was also going nowhere, and that team was also 6 games under 500 when that trade was made. It was made earlier in the season, but whatever. The rest of the year, they finished the year like on an incredible streak, and they ended up at 48 wins. I believe they went like 42-22 after the Gay trade. I don't think that's going to happen necessarily with this group, but I also want to at least like allow for that door to be open and for like us to be surprised, because I think that there is a renewed sense of optimism. Like you can definitely see that people are enjoying the style of play more and more, and I think one of the great things about that year in particular, going back to 10 years ago, was just what you felt this like serendipitous feeling about wow, the Raptors are actually good, and oh my god, like they're actually doing something. The difference there is the expectations back then was like so low, and and like to finish with 48 wins was already, I think, a franchise record.
And you had a new front office coming in, so like whichever direction, like there was more room allowed for, hey, we're going to be patient, we're going to evaluate this, we're going to see what materializes in the trade, and like,
and their best player at that time was not like, well, I mean, Pascal was like either best player, co-best player with Scotty, whatever you want to say. But my point is, they didn't have like a 29-year-old leading the charge. In that time, it was like Kyle was like 27, I believe.
And like Pascal, they kept trying to pack Kyle's bags for him.
You know what? There might be multiple parallels in this case.
Yeah. They also, that trade happened a little earlier, so you get a little bit more runway to turn things around. But they did start turning around like pretty much immediately.
Yeah,
they went on.
It came because they were on a West Coast road trip, and they had like multiple great wins against the Lakers, against the Mavericks, against OKC.
Yeah, they went on like a 14-6 run immediately.
And that's what this team needs to do if they want to keep it together.
3-1 so far, and now you get the LA back-to-back, which is sure that's cake.
If they beat the Clippers, the red hot Clippers, Tyronn Lue's Clippers, I will be hype in my.
The Lakers game's first, though, right?
I know.
Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to be that hype if they beat the Lakers. No offense.
Honestly, if they beat, we'll talk about this in the final segment as we keep the game. If they beat the Lakers with no Jakob Poeltl and basically no center on the roster against Anthony Davis, I will reevaluate the today's conversation in terms of like the defensive upside. If you manage to hang, the Lakers aren't very good offensively, but they do get to the rim and finish at the rim like better than just about anyone because Anthony Davis and LeBron. So we'll tee that one up later.
Okay, you know what? We will tee that one later because I did want to also ask you about Jakob Poeltl because it's gonna be tough, man. I know we've been complaining about Yak all year, but you haven't missed one game and all of a sudden we're down bad. So
well, and you don't have Precious, so I mean we'll get into some of the lineup iterations. You're gonna start Jonte, are you gonna start Small, or are you gonna what are you gonna do? You don't even have another center on the roster.
Okay,
and neither of the centers with the 905 can stay on the court. So I don't know that Moji or Makur Maker on a 10-day would even be available to you, given how in and out they've been. Speaking of the 905, one last note. So we've talked a lot about how people should be a little more active, voting to get Scotty Barnes into the All-Star game or whatever.
Yeah.
Marquise Noel, #1 in G League All-Star voting.
Oh,
so
really?
Far. Yeah, the first returns just came down. He is, he has like a monster social media following and stuff like that. Really a huge missed opportunity on my part to have not done a story on him so far, just for the layup retweets and stuff. But #1 in G League All-Star voting.
He is playing great, man.
Yeah.
I really do enjoy.
Can he play center?
The super deep threes. I mean, can he play center? It'd be kind of interesting to see him play center. But I love his passing. I love the threes. Again, who knows if he gets an opportunity with the Raptors to come up. But I'm happy for Marquise, and I'm happy he's got a lot of love. So we're going to take this break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. When we come back, let's bring in Michael Grange from the road, and we will ask him the question we ask everybody on this show. Where's Pascal going? All right, welcome back to the Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wayne Lou. Continue to be joined by co-host Blake Murphy. And we are going to get Michael Grange in shortly. He is on the road, and we are going to ask him all sorts of things. But we actually just had this conversation, and I would like to have this now, too, because there was a story that Grange wrote about Dennis Schroeder that went up on Sportsnet.ca, and it was about the transition that Dennis has made to going to the second unit. It was good background in that piece. Got quotes from Dennis. Got quotes from Darko, explained the whole situation. Dennis was brought here to Toronto with the opportunity to start. That was the incentive. That was kind of the deal. Clearly had a big backer in Darko. And whatever. Him starting with that group just didn't really work out. And eventually Darko, after about 30 games, decided we got to have this conversation with him and move him to the bench. Something that we also talked to Dennis about on the show as well. He gave a similar quote where he's just like, look, I'm just about winning. I just want to be professional about it. Grange added a nice little detail in there that when the news first was delivered to him, Dennis wasn't exactly thrilled about being demoted to the second unit. This is before the trade. But clearly he's really slotted in and fitted in well. My point is, after all this work about writing the piece and being fair and giving you insight into the situation, the only one piece that ends up getting aggregated is that Dennis was unhappy about being demoted to the second unit, and this really caught on. This really went viral, and all of a sudden, the big takeaway for most people was just Dennis is an unhappy guy and that he's selfish.
Dennis wanted to run his own, be the face of the franchise, run his own team is the way it got aggregated. And I was like, I hadn't read Grange's article yet. And I was like, there's no way Grange's article says this. Like, there's no way Dennis would say publicly after, clarifying his comments to us from after the Detroit game and things like that. And there's no way Grange would write it that sensationally if Dennis didn't say that, let alone he's averaging 16.7 assists and has been lethally efficient since the move. And the Raptors have played much better in his minutes. He's been a monster plus in 7 straight games.
Yeah.
Never mind all of that. 7 games ago when this happened, he was briefly unhappy with it.
Yeah. So I don't know. Maybe this is just because we talk to Dennis every week and obviously we see Grange a ton too, but I just don't feel like it was a fair representation of the scenario, both to the writer and to the player involved. But let's bring in Michael Grange to get his thoughts on this. Grange, how do you feel about being aggregated?
Yeah, it was a little shock when I saw that, and I don't follow that account, and it just came across my feed, and it sort of kind of ruined my night a bit. I was like, wait a second, that's not how I meant that, and and so it is what it is. It's just part of how things go, and we'll see how things shake out. But basically, the message there really is when I asked Dennis specifically about this the other night, he's like, as he's explained to you guys, he really just wants to find a way to excel with this group, and I don't think it should be all that surprising to anybody that prior to the trade, when he got moved out of the starting lineup, I don't think it was any reflection on Dennis or his play. I mean, I think he's probably over-indexed in most measures based on, him being signed and how he's performed leading up to that. But as you point out, there just needed to be a shift in the starting lineup and a kind of a remix. And I think at that moment was Dennis saying, yeah, I'd love to come off the bench, or, was it his first choice? Then no, obviously not. Who would choose that? I don't think it's a very earth-shattering thing to infer, or to have somebody infer to me. But the flip side is not how you feel; it's what you do. And clearly he hasn't missed a beat. And now with since the trade, it's pretty clear how it was going to shake out. And I think the whole point of the piece really is, with Dennis coming off the bench and, quickly starting at point guard, and then, them playing minutes together at point guard and in the closing lineup at times, the Raptors have what they've had. If you look historically, whenever they've been good, it's almost always been when they have depth at point guard. I don't think that's unique to Toronto, by the way, but it's kind of like the easiest formula to create a competitive team is just have a quality point guard on the floor at least 48 minutes a game. And a lot of times, we've seen, when the Raptors were at their very, very best, they had superb point guard play, often for more than 48 minutes, because Fred VanVleet and Kyle Lowry would play together. And, I think that's the earliest returns really of this trade, is you have, quickly starting. He looks like he's going to be really good. You have Dennis playing some of the best basketball of the season coming off the bench, and then you have stretches of them playing together, which has been really effective as well.
And look, I thought when they signed Dennis, it's been interesting to hear that, he was kind of told this will be your starting job. And we know that since day one of training camp, they've operated with that 5-man unit that they had. I had kind of thought the point was, well, this is a guy who has experience doing both. He started 320 some odd games coming into the year. He's come off the bench for 370 some odd games. If you acquire a point guard, if Scotty Barnes runs with more point guard duties, there's flexibility there. I thought that was part of the draw. And I'm sure part of the sales job to Dennis Schroeder, like you were alluding to there, Grange, with closing lineups and more 2-point guard lineups. Great hat, by the way. I saw you tip your head down there. That's a great hat. Dennis's minutes are almost unchanged since moving to the bench, less than 1 minute per game difference in what he's playing. Grange, I wonder, in reporting this out and talking to Dennis, talking to Darko around this, did you learn much about, this is kind of the first the losing is difficult, but this is kind of the first difficult role change or conversation Darko's had to have as a head coach. And we kind of talked about this in the preseason when the vibes were all high and stuff. Like, how does that carry over when you hit your first losing streak, or how does that carry over the first time you have to sit someone down and have a conversation like that? What did you learn in reporting this out in that regard?
Well, I think that he's willing to do it, number one, and he's willing to do it with a guy that he has a really clear bond with. And when you talk about Dennis having his own team or whatever, whatever how we phrase that, really being a guy who kind of is the heartbeat of a team, that's early in the season, Darko was talking about that, and when he really believed in Dennis so that much that this is a guy who's capable of that. And I think if you take it back a little bit. I mean, I wrote a piece earlier this year about the Raptors, their playing group, their play group, they call it, the guys who scrimmage on game days who aren't really in the rotation. And, Dennis is doing a lot of stuff as a leader of this team, as a veteran that, should be recognized. And in that piece I did, Dennis he hangs back, watches the play group, and he's like, his level of engagement and that kind of stuff. This is like an hour after his own practice is finished. He's participating in that. When Malachi Flynn was here, they were joined at the hip. He was really instrumental in, trying to make Malachi as comfortable as he could as he tried to grow into a new role. So, there's, to say to have his own team, like maybe it's misconstrued, but really what it means is to have a team where he is a pivotal piece. And I think whether he's starting or coming off the bench, I think the fact is he is that because of the position he plays, and I think the personality he has. And so I don't think it was I can't characterize exactly what that conversation was like with Dennis and Darko, but the point is two guys who have a lot of history and have a lot at stake in this thing being a success were able to come to an agreement. And the fact that Dennis is bought in, is playing great, I think it reflects really well on him. I think it reflects really well on Darko. And this is just part of this business. Is if you have a good team, you're going to have unhappy players because the reality is you have probably too many guys who are capable of playing, roles that maybe there's not enough room. There's not enough minutes to go around. Basically, that's the story of a good team. And so, the Raptors really haven't had that problem until this trade, and injecting quality guys like Quick and RJ into it. It means, the benefit is of you're deeper as a starting unit, you're deeper as a bench unit, and somebody has to make some kind of sacrifice. And then in Dennis's case, it means he's coming off the bench. But I think it's, as we've seen, the benefits are worth it.
Yeah. I also do think bigger picture, it is interesting that there's just not a lot of franchises that would bring in, using the mid-level, somebody completely new to the organization who would then try to be the heart and soul of the team, or like a heartbeat of the team. And I think that Dennis has, in his efforts, done quite well in this sense, because you look at, for example, the most difficult point of the season, right? They lose to Detroit. You were there for that. They lose to Detroit. The trade is made the day of that game, and they had just lost on a back-to-back to Boston the night before, get in super late in the night, I think 4 a.m. And then they play that game, and of course they played hard. They just lost by 1 or 2 possessions to a team in Detroit. Really disappointing game. After the game, you get to really hear the breaking points for a lot of players. Who speaks up, and what do they say? And I think that, yeah, I mean, for Dennis to actually call out that like this group just doesn't have the togetherness of the other winning programs that he's been on is kind of something that you would actually want out of a player who is going to take up that role for you. It's just that most teams wouldn't need to do that with the mid-level to bring in somebody who's new to the group. That's a separate conversation. But the other conversation that I'm sure most people want to hear about is just this ongoing Pascal Siakam trade road trip, which is set up quite nicely here for storytelling purposes. The Raptors obviously going to Sacramento, then going to Golden State, and Raptors reportedly being linked to both of those two teams. Grange, I just wanted to ask you, like, are you tired of writing Pascal Siakam trade pieces? And B, like, what is the level of trade interest from teams like Sacramento and Golden State after, traveling with the team for this road trip so far?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. This is the second year in a row, kind of in the weeks leading up to the trade deadline. The Raptors been on the road, been out west. In fact, I think they were through Sacramento and Golden State this exact same time last
Mm.
year. A lot of the conversations
Yeah,
were
I was gonna say
the same. Like
deja
it's
vu.
kind of uncanny, but I think that there's definitely been conversations like you can tell by who's on the trip. I mean, Masai Ujiri's been on this trip. He just left after the Golden State game. Bobby Webster's been here the whole trip. And there's a lot of, you do see agents present. You see other executives present. There's conversations happening. These things happen all the time, but of course, they're more crucial this time of year. And I think as it relates to Sacramento, and this is how I wrote this the other day, and with Golden State, um, the challenge there is finding the right fit. And I think with Sacramento, yeah, they definitely would have interest in Pascal Siakam, but to the point where would they, let me frame it this way. There's a lot of conversation about, whoever wants to trade for Pascal Siakam, they will get his bird rights. And if with those bird rights, they want to offer Pascal Siakam a 5-year contract at the max, I'm pretty sure that that would supersede a lot of that would cut through a lot of stuff,
Mm.
right? And I think what's happening here, and I'm pretty sure what happened here with Sacramento, is they're not necessarily in a position that they want to offer 5 years at the max for Pascal Siakam, or maybe even. And so, if you're not going to do that, then put yourself in Pascal's shoes. Why would him or his representation? Why would they, necessarily sign off on a trade unless it's something they really want, and when they know that there's free agency out there? And so, my understanding is I don't know how far things ever really got with Sacramento, because at the other side of it, I don't think they were all that committed to making a real offer, or not that they can officially, but I don't to kind of go to that full max level. And so then that kind of dictates what they're really going to offer. And that's why you get reports about Harrison Barnes being the focus of the deal. It's like,
Yeah, it's not exciting, man.
and then from the Raptors point of view, you can't do that. You
No, you
can't
can't.
trade
You actually can't.
second for Harrison Barnes. And, and there's no way that the Kings were going to trade Keegan Murray. You're in that building the other night, and every time he hits a three, it's Keegan Murray. And that guy's a really good player, but he's also kind of like a real part of their fabric, and he's cheap. This is a team, Sacramento, that's already got 2 guys on maxes. So, you can't walk away from a player of that quality earning at the, at his on a rookie contract. So, yeah, a lot of that stuff, I just didn't see a fit there. And then on the Golden State side, um, there's not an obvious fit there either. I mean, you see I think the Chris Paul contract is really interesting because he's injured. So that kind of gets the money gets taken care of really quickly. But then you start going through the potential options, and, Kuminga, I just don't think that the Warriors are going to trade that guy. I mean,
Okay.
when you look at that 2 timeline strategy that they had, well, Jordan Poole's out the door. Wiseman was a bust. And so now the ownership is going to sign off on trading Kuminga, who is kind of like just ready to pop, and is kind of like the remaining, the kind of the prize jewel out of that whole process. I just don't think it's going to happen. So, people want to attach Wiggins to the Raptors because of the obvious ties. That's not going to happen. I mean, there's no way. That's basically, the Raptors aren't going to take on that money. Then all of a sudden, even if Andrew was playing really well, just imagine that kind of conflict. Well, if all of a sudden you've got RJ, who you just signed, who's everyone's really excited about it now. He's in a fight for playing time with Andrew Wiggins. Like, it would get pretty awkward. So I just don't think that's on the table. So I mentioned that Moses Moody is former high school teammate of Scotty Barnes. If there were to happen something with Golden State, and I don't really think it is. I mean, that would be an interesting one because there's a lot of fits there. But again, is that are you really going to build a trade for
Not a
Pascal
headliner.
Siakam?
Yeah.
Moses Moody. I mean, no offense to Moses Moody. I just don't
Yeah.
see it. So, again, a lot of stuff going on, a lot of talk, a lot of heat, but I just don't necessarily think that they're any closer to a deal than they were a couple of weeks ago.
A small piece of breaking Raptors news here. The Raptors just announced that Jakob Poeltl is out indefinitely with a left ankle sprain. That roll of the ankle he played through the other night. He will be reevaluated in 2 weeks, and then we'll get an update on that. So Raptors are centerless here for a little bit. Grange, I was originally going to ask you a follow up on potential Siakam trades, and you centered the conversation on Keegan and Jonathan Kuminga, which to me signals something that makes sense, which is the Raptors are worried about who is the headline item. Maybe they don't care as much about, Davion Mitchell plus a deep future first or whatever. They want the headline item there. But I am now going to pivot to a Jakob Poeltl question. The Raptors don't have any other centers on the roster other than two-way player Jonte Porter right now. Even their two centers at the 905 level, if you wanted to 10-day them, they've been very banged up and in and out of the lineup. They do have a roster spot for an emergency 10-day guy, I guess. But, man, in the short term, what does this look like? What are they going to do here tonight against, by the way, Anthony Davis and then Ivica Zubac?
A couple of thoughts. One, everyone should read your piece about Jonte Porter.
Thank
very,
you.
Very relevant all of a sudden. Very well done. Two,
Blake sprained Jakob's ankle to get more views.
If there's a way to bet the over on Ivica Zubac, maybe do that. I don't know if that's that's a thing, but yeah, I mean, when this trade went down, like obviously a lot of synergies and it quickly is a really exciting player and all these kinds of things. But two things that really jumped out at me is, who's going to take some of these tough covers that obviously OG Anunoby was so great at, and two, this without Precious Achiuwa, this team, which was already thin at center, is incredibly thin at center, and this whole season unfolded as uneven as it has, with just an incredible run of health. And so first, you get the first injury and it's at a position and at a time when the Raptors have almost no options. So I presume, it'll be interesting to see what they do. Maybe they do start Jonte Porter and they just kind of keep the bench unit intact with Chris Boucher, or maybe you do elevate Boucher and you just play a super high tempo approach. Maybe you play Scotty at center and you start Gary Trent. I don't know. And you just go really small. But, it just kind of highlights to me that this roster build is very much in progress. Like there just is not enough depth. There aren't enough pieces. And, Jakob getting hurt is going to be, it's going to lay that evident pretty clear. Like maybe through style of play, they can get around it, but that's going to be a tough one to deal with in the next couple of weeks.
G League big man pile, if you're looking at a 10-day too, is fairly bleak right now. It's not you're looking at like a Trey Jemison maybe as the kind of depth guy that you could maybe pluck out of the G League right now. It's not rich this year because everyone scoops those guys up on two ways if you're a capable guy for a situation just like this.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's interesting though, right? Because, if you play Jonte and start him and then, you basically toggling between him and Boucher, we've spent so much time on this show, as everyone has, just talking about spacing and lack of, and how does Poeltl and Dennis, how it kind of creates some issues for Pascal and Scotty and all the rest of it. Well, you're going to, their hand has been forced. And so all of a sudden they're going to have to play a spacing lineup, kind of 5 out. And, I'm sure defensively there's going to be some issues there. But it's going to be really interesting to see what Scotty and Pascal look like when they're playing with, a point guard who can kind of spread the floor and a center position where, they all of a sudden there's room in the paint. So could be a benefit there.
Well, Grange, I look forward to reading your coverage about this team, and we will call you probably in 2 weeks to ask about if Pascal's getting traded or extended. So I hope you enjoy that deja vu moment. But we're going to take another break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Wim Lou. Continue to be joined by co-host Blake Murphy. I guess I don't really need to say that anymore, man. It's just going to be the two of us for every episode, unless one of us takes vacation.
Also,
So,
we're several months into the season.
Yeah.
Like even with
do I gotta introduce you every time? This is Blake.
yeah, I don't think
Have you
you
met Blake?
do.
He loves the G League. Yeah. What else?
Yeah, although I don't like the available pool of unsigned centers if you need to call someone up from the G League right now. I think if there were a good rebounding plug-in center, the Thunder probably already would have scooped him up because that's
God
the
damn it, man.
one and only weakness on that OKC Thunder team, which I mentioned because we're about to talk to Andrew Schlecht, who does a great job covering the Thunder as well as appearing on things like No Dunks too. Basically, he's going around podcast to podcast, show to show, holding up a little book with Shai's face on it and preaching Shai for MVP because he's right there in the mix. Andrew Schlecht joins us now. What's up, buddy?
How's it going, guys? Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming on. So another good Shai game yesterday. We're going to ask you a lot of Thunder stuff, but a lot of it centers on Shai. It was just the Wizards yesterday, but another very, very fun game for Shai. I got to ask you, you've been a Thunder fan a long time and doing content about them for years now. The evolution of Shai and watching that game to game and then season to season, just how much fun has that been, man? Because when you guys picked him up in that Paul George trade, everyone liked him, but he was like he's coming off second team all rookie, and everyone's like, yeah, this guy's cool, this guy's good, this guy's funky. I don't remember even here in Canada a single person being like, yeah, he's going to be fighting with Jokic and Embiid for the MVP.
Yeah, it's kind of shocking as you keep moving through Shai's career, how he continues to improve. I mean, he improves every single year. And that's not something even that started in the NBA. That started like in high school. Like no one really thought of him as a guy who's going to go D1, early on in his high school career. And then he gets better and better. And it's like, oh, I think he can play for Kentucky. And he goes to Kentucky and he's like the 5th or 6th best guy on that team to start the season. Doesn't even start. Moves into the starting lineup as the season goes on. Great. He has his rookie season with the Clippers. Wow, this guy's pretty good. Maybe he could be a starter one day. And then we get to Oklahoma City. It's like, cool. Like maybe we have the starting shooting guard or point guard or whatever he is to move into the future. And now he's one of the best 5 guys in the NBA. It's crazy what he's been able to do. He does it like with what I think is genuine humility. And I think it's something that's kind of working in his favor too, is like he works hard. He doesn't feel like he's accomplished anything yet. And he's just such a perfect fit for this franchise, especially whenever you're starting a rebuild. Like you're looking for the superstar. And it's funny, he was there from the very beginning, from this rebuild. He was there. And now they've added Chet, who's come in. He's been amazing. Jalen Williams has been amazing. But it starts with Shai and the continued improvement that he's had.
Yeah, his story is incredible. And I think it is really one of those things where it's a rare superstar that doesn't seem like he takes up that much space. It doesn't seem like he needs to play one way. He needs to have this outsized personality. Everything is about him, especially for a young guy. He is really down to earth. We've seen, like, for example, the Canada run, which, saw Canada earn Olympic qualification for the first time in 24 years on the men's side and win bronze at the World Cup. He showed a lot of leadership, too. Like, whenever the stakes were higher and Canada was down a lot of those games, he would step his game up and single-handedly bring them on comebacks. His defense is also progressed a lot too. He's not a guy who just comes in and plays one way and just gets huge. Like he's not a Trae Young type, he's gonna play both ends of the floor. And then I think the coolest thing about Shai is just in crunch time, he's absolutely deadly in crunch time too. Yeah. So he's really the full package. And honestly, I gotta ask you, as a Thunder fan, there's nothing really outside of the Josh Giddey situation, there's nothing really to not feel good about with the whole team. To see all these good stories happening all at once with such a promising future. Can you just even describe the feeling of watching that, knowing that this is going to be a great team for a decade to come?
Yeah, this is the sweet spot of NBA fandom, where it's the young up and coming team. Everybody around you is realizing that they're good. Mm-hmm. Still, the expectations are not there yet.
Yes.
And the expectations don't really hit until you play at least one playoff series. And if they lose in round 1 this year, or even in round 2, it's okay, well, now it's you better get to round 2 or the Western Conference Finals the next year. And that's going to be the rest of this team's life cycle with this fan base. And so right now it's all gravy. It's everybody knows our guys are good. Mm-hmm. They're really fun. They play together. Like you mentioned, Shai in the clutch. he's been unbelievable, but he's also willing to be the screener. If you watched the Celtics game last week, the reason that Jalen Williams got that shot in the lane to win the game was because Shai set a screen for him.
Yeah.
You know, so it's not just like Shai is just like this killer. It's like, no, he understands moments and understands like when he maybe needs to take a step back and let somebody else shine too, which is really rare and honestly not something that we've seen a whole lot in Oklahoma City. There's been a lot of stars in Oklahoma City in their short time in the NBA, but not a guy like this. So he's been impressive, and it's been a really fun season. You know, the arena was not very full last year, and even to start this season, and so people are starting to come back. Like it feels like the last like 3 weeks, it feels like, oh my gosh, like the Thunder are back, and like people are starting to get it, and it's been really fun. And to have the playoffs back in Oklahoma City is going to be such a joy.
Yeah, it's gonna be sweet, and it's gonna be funny. I remember in the World Cup this year when Canada would be in these close games, or they're trying to pull a must-win game out against Spain, or they're playing the U.S. in the bronze medal game, or whatever. Basically, any situation that they got into, even against Luka Doncic, who is, you know, has an argument to be higher than this, but like that one could devolve to one-on-one at times. Like, it was such a weird feeling, you know, like, oh yeah, Canada's the best player on the floor. Like that's a real comfort. Like I felt that with Kawhi in 2019 here in Toronto, but it's been pretty rare to be like, yeah, you got the best player on the floor, you'll figure it out. When it comes to Shai's ability to get a look off, and we'll mention the crunch time stats, Andrew, and just in general, like, let's focus just perimeter, because Jokic and Embiid present their own things with their size and interior presence, but from a perimeter perspective, is there anyone as difficult to guard as Shai one-on-one in the NBA right now? Like, obviously, this is borderline blasphemous to not put Steph at number one, but it feels like the 4 levels of scoring, the combination of moves, the in-between speeds, I don't know where you even start with Shai. Like, the Celtics, who have the best defensive backcourt in the NBA, didn't know what to do with Shai either.
Yeah, I think some of it too is like he's starting to take that step back 3 more and more. It's like there's the weapon there. And then like, you know, that he can get, once he gets to that mid range and he stops, you're like, it's over. Like, you're dead. And you also know that he can get to the hoop and finish around anybody. I mean, he's shooting over 70% in the restricted area this season.
It's absurd, man.
He is about as unstoppable as it gets, especially when he can get a defender on his heels because they think he wants to get to the hoop. Then he can just stop. You talk about the change of speeds. It's like the deceleration stuff with him that is just so valuable because he can just stop. And now, for the first time in his career as the star, there's actually space on the floor because you can put him out there in crunch time with Chet. You have to have a man just glued to. Same with J-Dub. You can put Isaiah Joe out there, who's been one of the best shooters in the league this year. You know, even Giddey. They've been finding ways to use him that have been helpful. They've been using him in the dunker spot at times. They've been putting him kind of in the middle of the floor on the weak side a little bit to help. You know, they're finding ways, and he has space. He has teammates that people care about now. And like, that has made him even more lethal. I think people came into this season thinking, okay, you know, there's a lot of guys on this team. There's a lot of mouths to feed. Shai's probably going to take a step back in the scoring department. Maybe he'll score like 27, 25 points per game. The other guys will get theirs. Like, no, like, this is clearly still a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander run team. He's still like the complete engine of the offense. The other guys fit around him really well. And because of that, like, he can just operate the way he wants to, especially in the clutch.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned it. Having a spacing 5, like, a rim protecting spacing 5 is like exactly what you would want it to see added to this group. And Chet Holmgren is like exactly that type of player. And the fit is honestly like as seamless as I've seen for a rookie to come in. It seems like he's hit the ground running. He's been excellent this whole time. For me, he would be the leading candidate for Rookie of the Year. I mean, he's impacting wins at a level that maybe you would say Wemby's more talented and bigger, and I agree with all of that, but he's clearly impacting wins, which is so rare for a rookie. Can you just speak to his fit, number one, with the group right now, and also just what he's like personality-wise? Because I think that's the other story to come out, is that Chet is a very unique personality.
Yeah, I haven't done anything. It's only 30 games is a pretty good one.
Yeah.
I'm paraphrasing here for radio-friendly language.
Right. Chet's been a blast to watch. He he fits this team. He fits exactly the way they want to play. Like they want to play fast. They want to spread the floor. And they also want to be a really high level defensive team. And he fits like all of those. He has 90 blocks in the season so far, which is just insane for a rookie. And then like the shooting has been real. That's the one thing that I had some questions about. There's two things that I had big questions about heading into the season was, is he a real shooter like from day one? And he's answered that question so far. And then like, what does his handle look like at this level? Like, is he able to pull off any of these moves that he only like sometimes pulled off in summer league? And he's been better in that department as well. And so like those two things have allowed them to play this, like, I mean, nobody else can really play exactly like this because the Thunder have 5 guys on the court at all times that can shoot, pass, and dribble. And that was kind of the goal. I mean, if you watch the way that the Thunder drafted from the beginning of this rebuild, is like it's skill. Like skill is number one. Like you better be able to like pass the ball is one of the huge things for the Thunder. I think put the ball on the floor is another. And like everybody can do it. There's no like one trick pony out there for this Thunder team. Even Isaiah Joe, and he's been kind of a fun one because he's one that they brought in late. He was cut by the Sixers. No one really knew, where he was going to land. People thought of him as only a shooter, but he's even evolved his game too to kind of fit more that Thunder style. But yeah, he fits this team like a glove. The competitiveness, as you like speak about his personality, is just like through the roof, and you see that most the second time that he plays a team. So the Thunder played, their first game was against Chicago, and there were some embarrassing moments for Chet, especially against Andre Drummond.
Yeah.
And then you watch game 2, like go watch any possession where Andre Drummond was anywhere near him. He embarrassed Drummond because he went and like learned from that situation. Like he goes and watches film. He works tirelessly. Like the dude wants to be great, and he's already like on his way there. And I think the personality stuff in front of the media is evolving. Tim McMahon, I think, was the one who asked him that question. There's something about Tim McMahon that just makes people want to cuss, and that came out.
It's probably because he cusses more than anybody who does media. But yeah,
right. So that came out in that moment. But Chet, like he's pretty competitive. He's also like so Thunder. Like, oh my gosh, like he like really sticks by the book for the most part in media sessions. Just talks about how he wants to get better. Like this is a process. All these things. And you're like, okay. Like Sam Presti is like fist pumping in the background somewhere with the things, not only the things that Chet does on the court, but the stuff that he says too.
Yeah. By the way, why is that? Why is OKC's strategy like? Because I remember this came out like infamously back in the day. Somebody wrote about it for Grantland back in the day about just how you have like this conglomeration of stars, Westbrook and KD, and before that Harden. But like they just don't allow a lot of access relative to the teams, and they want to keep it as quiet as possible. Like, where does that come from? And I guess it's still the same thing to this day.
Yeah, it is a lot of the same stuff. The organization's been really great to me. Like I have gotten access to players and stuff at different times, and they've been good. But I think a lot of it is just like to protect the players. Like to them, the player is the number one thing.
Okay.
And there are times where I think they're too protective because like, this is a young group of guys that's really, really good. None of them, I don't think, would say anything to really mess anything up. But I think it's ultimately just to kind of protect the players from themselves a little bit, and then to just kind of guard them and make sure that they have like the best experience possible. And like part of the strategy is like, hey, we're not going to do a whole lot of media. So, and they kind of have like controlled that environment to the best of their ability. And, being somebody who's, at a lot of the games and gets to be around the players, like there's part of me that is frustrated by it, but there's part of me that's like, man, I don't blame them. I'm not sure that, that this is such a bad strategy for them. Now, for somebody like me who's like creating content, I'm like, this sucks, but when I look at it from that angle, it's like, okay, I can get it.
All right, so Shai's going to win MVP. Chet is going to upset Wemby for Rookie of the Year. Mark Dagnall is going to win Coach of the Year. And then let's make it a grand slam. Jalen Williams, Most Improved Player. I'm generally against giving it to a second-year guy who was a lottery pick because, of course, you're supposed to take a jump in your second year. But already, like 18 months into the J-Dub experience, like he went 12th overall. I think people thought he would be good. But he's like bordering up on co-star status already with Shai and Chet. 18 points a game, very efficiently. The three's huge. Like a really nice knack for playing around in the spaces that Shai creates for him. Man, how big a stride has he taken this year? And I guess like the hardest part with Chet and Jada being so good already is like, I thought the plan was like long-term accumulate all these assets and like you hope to get a Chet. And then it's like, okay, well, you got a Chet right away. And then you also got Jalen Williams, who might be one of those guys as well. Just how well does he fit with those two? And, you know, what is the upside here with a guy like Jalen Williams, who, you know, again, seems like a really good fit?
Yeah, man. I mean, there's a lot of times that you watch him and you think, oh my gosh, like he's doing like a Shai impression out there. You know, with the way that he drives and the way that he can like stop and pop in the mid range as well. I mean, he fits really well, and he's one that, at least for now, is like he doesn't really care what his shot attempt numbers look like. Like he wants to contribute on all levels. Like he's become a better passer. Like he likes to get a lot of steals as well. He's somebody who will take on the toughest defensive assignment on specific nights, especially against bigger guys. Like he'll be the one to defend Anthony Davis a lot. You know, whenever the Thunder play the Lakers, you know, he'll take on whatever. A part of that is like he's got really long arms and he's gotten really strong. Like
he has gotten strong. Yeah,
he beefed up over the offseason and he is using that strength to his advantage this season. And yeah, it was shocking because out of that draft, you're like, okay, it's Chet, and then you have Ousmane Dieng and you have Jalen Williams, and they selected them back to back. And you're like, okay, we'll see. This guy kind of profiles as a role player. He's like an older college player that's coming in the league, maybe more of a finished product kind of thing. It's like, no, like this is like a big, like modern 3-4 that shoots threes, that can get to the hoop, that can handle, that can pass, that thinks the game at a high level. And also like off the court, like he is like one of the most like fun guys too. Like he has great personality. This was kind of a funny thing. We were talking to Mark pregame last week, and I was just asking him, like, what does he bring to you guys off the court? You know, what does J-Dub bring to your locker room? And he just talked about like how he's like, he's one of a kind. He's different. He's like, he's an artist. He said, you know, there's scientists and there's artists. And he said, and Dub is definitely an artist. And then basically the whole room was like, whoa, wait a minute. So who are the scientists and who are the artists? You can't just say that.
Yeah.
Just say that to us. And so he's like, well, you know, Shai is definitely more of an artist, and like Chet's a scientist. And we're like, well, what are you? You know, he's like, I don't know. And then we asked him about it later, and he was like, I don't really even have any clue what I was saying. But like, he was like trying to basically say that J-Dub is just like such a unique character, you know, within all of this. And, you know, what you're looking, if you want a championship level team, you're trying to find like 3 amazing players. Like you need like a top 5 player. You need a guy who's like bordering on like top 15, top 20, and then you need a guy who's maybe a top 30, top 40 player if you want a title level team. And the Thunder have seemed to already accumulate what could be that in the next couple of years. And yeah, that Jada piece is a big one, because sometimes that's a really tough one to find. You know, the Lakers themselves have been looking for that guy outside of LeBron and AD. There's a lot of teams that want to find that guy, and it seems like the Thunder found him. And you're right. Now you look at like all the picks they have, and it's like, okay, well, like now what? Like now what do we do with all of these picks? And like, how do you fill in this roster around these guys? And I think that to me is going to be the most interesting question to answer over the next probably 12 to 18 months.
Well, let's transition there then, because, you know, that's the question over the next 12 or 18 months. It's also the question over the next 4 weeks, right? Like we know that Sam Presti is, first of all, it's the Flex seal of front offices. Nothing is leaking. Absolutely nothing getting out of that sticky black tape. We also know that patience is going to win out, even though the Thunder have more assets than you could possibly ever use right now if they wanted to make a move. You mentioned earlier, this is kind of, to use a Pat Riley term, the innocent climb. The expectations don't start until next year. You could make a case as a front office of, let's see how these guys do in the playoffs, and that will inform us what we need to add and what pieces most need to complement these main 3 guys. Having said that, would you, as a Thunder person, or do you think they would consider, you know, a more moderate move at this deadline, knowing that, hey, there's a huge hole in terms of rebounding. You could really use another bench big, or you could just use another guy just in case anyway. I would imagine the big massaging of the core is for an off season. That seems to be Presti's approach, rather than doing it on the fly here and changing the timeline. But at this deadline, could you see them fortifying this and saying, hey, we got a window to make a run here?
I think they're going to stay patient. I think that they're not going to do anything. They're certainly not going to do anything big at this deadline. But I also look at the West and I'm like, man, there's an opportunity here. Like, outside of the Nuggets, who do we really believe, like, wholeheartedly is going to make the conference finals in the Western Conference? I don't know.
I guess the Clippers, with the asterisk of health, would probably be the number 2. Maybe.
Yeah. The funniest thing about the Nuggets is, like, you guys have beat them like twice, and like one in a blowout and then one in a very close game where I think so I don't even know. So but to your point, like, it is kind of open for them.
So I could just wonder, because they have a lot of young guys on the bench, and like we know, like, you just never know how a young guy's going to react when you hit the playoffs. Because like the playoffs are all about, hey, what is the worst thing about your team? And we're going to make you do that over and over again. And so if you're the Thunder, to me, there is an opportunity to go get another Canadian. Kelly Olynyk is a guy that I think would be great for them off the bench. Like a guy that you could play as a backup center. You could play him with Chet too, because he can spread the floor. I think somebody like that makes sense. I think if you're trying to find somebody for the Thunder, they have to play like the Thunder. They're not going to, I don't see them adapting anything for somebody just because they can rebound. I think they're willing to give that up. I think that they are.
So no Hassan Whiteside.
No Hassan Whiteside.
We might have to add him to the Raptors roster tonight, man.
Not coming through that door. I think, and Kelly's somebody that I think fits that. Like, good passer, good shooter, somebody that you can kind of play through a little bit. Like, that's what they want from that big position. So I think he could come in and kind of play that position. I think Royce O'Neal, somebody else.
And only $9.5 million. Easy to make the cap math work, even for a team that doesn't want to let anything other than Bertans go.
And he's expiring too. So, if he leaves your team, you're fine, because you have guys like Case and Wallace who are going to kind of play that similar role. I think you just need like maybe 1 or 2 more pieces just to come in that have played playoff basketball, that aren't going to be afraid of the moment, that understand like what to expect. And then like you could make a run and then you could let him go. Like, both, if you got Royce O'Neal and Kelly Olynyk, which I think are both like targets that you could get, both teams, like, they're expiring contracts. Both are probably not going to be sticking around wherever they're at. Just flip some seconds for those guys. The Thunder have like 23 second round picks. Just flip them. And then you can have those guys on the bench. And also, if your young guys are good, you don't have to worry about like not playing those guys too. So to me, it makes too much sense to try to do something like that. That's just like a smaller, like, tinker move with just so that you can actually feel like you can make a run this year if you wanted to. And then you can move forward, and they may have the 11th pick in this next draft. Then you can draft somebody and bring them in, and you can still continue with your plan. But to me, I think there is a big opportunity in the Western Conference this year that I wouldn't want to miss out on, just because you're like, oh man, they're like one guy away, like one competent player away.
Danny Ainge and Sean Marks, if you're listening to this, you can fix Pokashevsky. Make that salary matching, pick up a second. You can fix him. It's just the playing time. Don't ignore the 4 years of data where he's even a bad G leaguer. You can fix him. Make the salary math work.
Yeah. Poku, who I affectionately called Big Skeets, to I think J.E. Skeets when he was actually on the program. I don't think he likes that one too much. I'm sorry, Skeets, actual Skeets, mini Skeets. But I mean, I this is an interesting thing, because for everybody thinking about the Thunder, everyone draws the comparisons to like a decade ago when they had like the 3 superstars and eventually the 2 superstars plus like Serge and whatever. And it just felt like for those teams, like, they really struggled to cobble together like the rest of the roster. It was like, okay, Derek Fisher's gonna be your point guard, and like Thabo Cephalosha is like nice as a 3-and-D kind of role, I guess. And it's like their bench is going to be like Royal Ivy and like, some of these other, it just like started to really, really tail off. And it was like just 2 guys playing iso ball. This team is just so different from that. Like, it's so many guys contributing.
You're not selling yourself on, well, Andre Roberson's become a really good cutter. He's not hurting the offense that bad to get his defense on the floor.
Yeah. It's like, you look at the team right now and it's such an absurd thing. And whatever, some of these guys haven't even played 100 minutes, but there's 11 guys on the roster right now with a true shooting of 60 or higher.
By the way,
Like,
Andrew,
11.
probably the worst I've ever been like bodied by someone is someone compared my rec league, like my men's league game, to Andre Roberson and called me rec league Roberson one time because it's just like all defensive effort and less than zero offensively. I thought only a true Thunderhead would appreciate that.
That is incredibly disrespectful.
Yeah. Hey, the defense is there, but less than zero offense.
Yeah, and like to speak to the effective field goal stuff with these guys is it's a style of play that feeds into that too. You know, because like the first go around, it was here's our fastball, and it is better than anything that you can do because it's like Westbrook. Like Westbrook needed one pass to generate like a great shot. You know, and Durant just needed to have the ball. Like that's all he needed to do. Like get out of the way. With this team. Like they share the ball so well. Like the amount of screens that are being set in Oklahoma City, like there's probably more screens set in like the last 3 years than there were the entire time they had Westbrook and Durant. Like they play the right way. They play like a really beautiful style of basketball, and it's really fun. And it really helps guys that like Aaron Wiggins is somebody that I'm not sure what he would look like on another team. But because like there are so many good passers and like one of his skill, I would say his NBA skill is cutting. Like that's his skill. Like he knows how to move throughout the court. And because of that, like he benefits from that greatly. 65% from two this season, 68% effective field goal percentage.
Yeah.
That's because like he knows how to move in and throughout space. With Westbrook on the court, like you didn't want anybody to move, like get out of the way. Like that space is like for this freight train. You're going to get run over if you move through it. So, you know, part of it is like the style of play that Mark Daigneault has put in place is like it's going to help accentuate most players if they kind of know how to work within the system. Like you're going to look really good.
Yeah. Well, we were going to try to sell you on potentially, you know, offloading some Raptors players if the Raptors were to sell, and if you guys needed a big body, maybe throw us the first round pick for Jakob. But I don't even know, man.
And now
after hearing this conversation, I'm like, you guys are just like so well off that I almost don't even want you guys to have anything more, you know, because you guys are on the upswing now. But after you guys are good and exciting and talked about and loved by the Ringer for another 3-4 years, you guys will be the villains again. And I'm looking forward to that moment because I'm already looking at you guys with such great envy. Seriously, Sam Presti's done an amazing job building that group. So, I mean, obviously, look, we'll see. Like, this is putting the cart before the horse because you still have to see what they do in the playoffs. Haven't even seen that kind of thing, but just based on the roster right now and the ages of the players and the games of the players, it just looks really nice. So, Andrew, appreciate you joining us, man.
Yeah, thanks, guys. Anytime.
Yeah, there you go. Andrew Schlecht has made me feel very envious.
Yeah.
Oh God.
Yeah, it's good stuff, man. I like when we can bring people on to just celebrate what they're gonna do. Thunder are a lot of fun. I don't know. I think they're sorry. I got distracted a little bit that Andrew's still on screen. We're going to break. Andrew, thank you so much, man. We're we gotta take a break here. Also, great hair maintaining through having the over the ear headphones.
Yeah.
Just a terrific showing from Andrew Schlecht. Make sure you check him out. All the athletic pods, but also popping up on No Dunks all the time and doing his own thing on Twitter as well. Probably the most indispensable Thunder tweeter. So go check him out. Let's take a break. Let's talk to Dan Woike about how the Lakers did your boys dirty. Demoy Hodge, Alex Fudge, waived.
Wow.
Only Colin Castleton's left off the big three of two ways with the Lakers.
Yeah.
Surely the biggest moves they'll make between now and February 8th.
Well, I hope they got their in-season tournament cash at least, because that's actually not a terrible way to leave the team.
They get half a share.
Half a share is probably more than the whole salary that they were getting.
Since they were cut now, it's about equal. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not a bad thing. The only thing I was going to say is Aaron Wiggins, unfortunately, has overtaken Andrew Wiggins. This is the number one A Wiggins, draft day A Wiggins in the league right now.
It's a tough one. Yeah. No relation. But,
no relation at all. Like, at all.
Claim him for the national team. He can play off Shai. We know this already.
Can we? Yeah, that'd be hilarious.
Naturalize Aaron Wiggins.
Just put the thumb on the passport. Be like, yeah, it's A. Wiggins. He's Canadian. There you go. All right, we're going to take our last break. I've been your host, Willow. You've been listening to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Welcome back to The Raptors Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. I'm your host, Win Lou. Obviously, still here with Blake Murphy. I'm going to get out of that. We got to write a new intro and outro for these. Anyway, we are also joined on the line by Dan Woike of the LA Times. Dan, I have to ask you, were you one of the 6 sources that wanted Darvin Ham to be let go. I haven't seen a lot of great stories over the years that has 6 sources put directly into the story. This is obviously in reference to a report that you were not right. It was Jovan and Shams who put this in. But
correct.
Yeah, not Darvin Ham under pressure by 6 unnamed sources.
Yeah, 6 people, right? It's like the 7 dwarves, the 6 sources.
The 6 sources.
Yeah, no, it's funny. The number is always there, right? To add a little bit of gravitas to it.
Yeah.
I don't know when multiple sources goes to 6. Like if you say 4, it's not that impressive. But if you say 5, you're like, 6, like you've got a basketball team and a backup. In case somebody sprains their ankle, like those guys could run out there. So
yeah.
Look, I think my big takeaway, guys, and all this stuff, and like not to discredit the report at all. Excuse me, I have a little bit of a scratch in my throat. Is that generally speaking, when teams that have expectations lose, like everybody's mad at everybody, and that's just the reality of it. And it's been a pretty unhappy environment over the last month. I mean, probably they can have their 6 sources. I might have my 6 reasons, guys. You know, coaching is part of it. Player performance is part of it. The travel is part of it. Guys have been sick. Like that's been a thing that's kind of worked its way through the locker room as part of cold and flu season. They've played really good teams too, and they've had injuries. It's like those things have all kind of made this gumbo of dissatisfaction that we're being served on a pretty regular basis. And, I think the win against the Clippers, and I've talked to some guys about it, and it did ease a little tension. I don't think anybody thinks that they're fixed, but there is some hopefulness now. The team is basically home through the remainder of the month, that maybe they can get their legs back underneath them a little bit, get a little fuller, and then, be aggressive at the trade deadline and see if they can put something together to bump this team back up a notch into like a contender tier.
Yeah. How much of that thinking like permeates this? Like obviously the day-to-day is hard, and despite Darvin Ham not liking that people live and die with it, they do. And LeBron has obviously had a hard time with it, but like we've run this play before, and we went through the same thing last year, and they made the trade deadline acquisitions they did, and things clicked at the right time. And when you have LeBron and Anthony Davis, as long as those guys are healthy, you're going to be in a good spot to build from anyway. Is that kind of your feel here? Like I know you just kind of said it, but like, yeah, tread water to the deadline. Then the front office will kind of run back what they did last year, try to turn, I don't know, D'Angelo Russell, Rui, whoever the pieces du jour that the Lakers want to get rid of as salary ballast. And then, everything will kind of be fine by April. Like, does it feel a little like deja vu to you?
No, I mean, I think, last year, right? Like they had the Westbrook contract as sort of like the fail safe, right? Like you had this player making $40+ million that you knew you were going to unbundle. Excuse me again. This year, it's a little trickier. I think, you're talking about D'Angelo Russell, who does have a player option at the end of next year. Westbrook was expiring. So that's not an expiring deal. Hachimura, I think, has 3 years on his contract.
Mm-hmm.
So that gets
and
a
much
trickier.
smaller numbers than Westbrook as well. So for you maybe
so
have
now
to
if you're
aggregate
combining, So if you don't love your depth, and now you're even talking about combining 2 players or maybe even a third, say bring back 1 player. Now you start to have to ask yourself, are we putting our thumbs enough on the scale, and those kinds of things? Is a more minor deal something that makes sense? Is it? Do you wait a little closer to the trade deadline, see what, salary and a couple second rounders can get you? Last year, like some version of that got you Rui Hachimura, and he mattered. Are they 1 player away from mattering? It's hard to know. I mean, I think, LeBron dismissed sort of the notion of the in-season tournament and the team they were in Vegas the other day. I am, I think, a little bit more proof of concept with that, but proof of concept in the sense of like, this is what the team looks like when they are like all out playoff level competitive. Like they can be a dangerous team. I have my concerns that they could win 16 games that way. Like I think real concerns about that. Could they win 4? Probably as is. 8 maybe, depending if things broke right. And sort of like, the question is just sort of though, is like, do they have enough firepower? Do they have enough oomph to get there? Really, that this is a team that is constructed to win playoff games. And when you have a 39-year-old superstar, and Anthony Davis is the secondary guy, and quite frankly, like not a ton of punch behind that. It's hard to win a lot of regular season games that way, and it's been hard for them when they're supremely focused and when they're locked in on the defensive end. They're a really hard team to beat. They don't have the offense to just outscore you, so they have to play really hard to win. And they have not been a team that's consistently played really hard.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, Zach LaVine is always listed to you guys. Like, is Zach LaVine something that is going to fix this whole situation with the gigantic number that he comes with?
I think there is a world in which Zach LaVine is so maligned in sort of smart basketball circles and basketball circles, like in dumb ones too. I traffic in both. I'm versatile like that.
It's good.
And where yeah, right. Where there's a world in which I think he's underrated, maybe. That like this is a pretty good offensive basketball. This is a pretty good offensive basketball player. The Lakers are a pretty bad offensive team. He doesn't play the same position of either of your other two really good players, and the injuries and the contract are bad enough that you might be able to get him without cashing in all your chips. That seems like a gamble that they could land on.
Yeah.
Eventually. Like they have not gotten there yet. That hasn't been, this isn't a team that is operating on a day-to-day basis, like sort of like it'll all be okay once we get Zach LaVine. Like that is not the vibe that I've gotten from them. This has been one of those weird things where like the Zach LaVine trade request feels like it came in like, I don't know what, like 2014 at this point. Like it feels like it's been out there a while. So, even before they went public, like, that's a name we heard a lot in the summer and stuff like that. Obviously is represented by Clutch, which always has its sort of Lakerdom ties. So like, they've had times to kick this around. I think there's a world in which the situation makes it more appealing than it probably should be or is. But I've kind of come to the conclusion that, like, I don't think it'd be the worst thing in the world for this team to have a high volume perimeter 3-point shooter. They would be worse on defense, I think, but that's just kind of, I think, he's an option. Like they don't have guys, the assets in terms of picks or players really to bring back the perfect fit wherever that exists. Like they don't have that deal. I think that's, so you're gonna have to bet and be a little speculative, and maybe you land the right guy.
I think that LeBron has a real history of this, where it's just like you have these like seemingly imperfect guys, you bring them in, and then they fit a lot better around him than they do elsewhere. I don't think, for example, it's not like a J.R. Smith situation where LeBron had to like, all right, JR, like you got to be like really focused, like you just do one thing, and like maybe once in a while you throw a bowl of soup at your coach. But like generally speaking, you're gonna like come in and play your role. I don't think like Zach has any of that. Zach's a really hardworking guy. Doesn't seem like too much of a personality to manage.
No, yeah.
So I mean, even in that sense, I'm like, okay, the Lakers got to do something because obviously the current group as it is, like as you mentioned, just offensively doesn't have that kind of pop. Even if like a smaller type of deal, like what would they try to upgrade something like even Gary Trent, for example? Another Clutch client relevant here.
Yeah, I mean Dennis Schroeder.
Dennis, yeah.
Run it back.
Yeah.
Like
I hit the freeze.
Do think like, yeah, like I love the freeze, guys. You guys know I love the freeze.
Yeah.
I think it's my favorite celly. Is that what a celly is, by the way, in hockey? Is a celebration?
Yes.
Is that what that is?
Very good.
You got it.
Oh, I got it. I got the quiz. Good. I think those are guys they would kick the tires on, certainly. The question though sort of becomes at a certain point, right? Is what you have to put in going to equal or surpass what you're getting out of this, right? So like if Gary Trent Jr. costs you salary and picks, how much better is that making you if you're the Lakers? Like it'll make you a little better, certainly, I think, depending on the what's going out, but does it? Is that, I don't think you're trading a first round pick in either of those situations. Like that doesn't seem to be like what the Lakers' appetite is, especially when you consider, if they don't, here's another factor, guys. If they don't trade a first round pick at the trade deadline, they'll have access to 3 first round picks on draft night.
Unheard of in this era for them. Yeah.
Yeah, this is sort of like a common Laker. Like, this was what the argument was to not make a trade with Westbrook his first year, when seemingly kind of everybody had sort of figured it out, that if we wait, we'll have extra picks we can make. I think it was 3 available to them on draft night the following year. Now, they didn't do anything. There wasn't a trade that made sense for them. And I don't know that there's a 3 first-round pick trade that's like lurking out there where they're bringing back the kind of piece where they can say, okay, now we feel comfortable with an Anthony Davis and blank sort of core moving forwards, right? Like, I don't think they'd feel that way about Trae Young necessarily, right? As a player who seemingly would be a multiple first-round pick. Donovan Mitchell. Maybe it's something like that, right? Where they get into that mix. I'm not sure. Like, but those are the things I think they're weighing. Is sort of like, when you have sort of limited assets, like, is this the right time, and how much better are you going to get by doing it? Now, I wrote about this a couple weeks ago in my newsletter. The tricky part about all of this is you have like the weirdest situation possible, and that's like you have a 39-year-old player who's seemingly still somehow in some version of a prime, right? Which is like this ultimate ticking clock. And you're kind of always going for it when you have him, or you should be, because there's really no tomorrow. But it puts like any thoughts of process and patience and, quite frankly, like long-term responsibility, it throws it all out the window, because like, I mean, we could wake up tomorrow and be old all of a sudden. I remember there was like, I turned like 31 and all of a sudden like was just hungover at the sight of a beer.
Oh,
and it was like it was fast, like where I went from like being able to like be out in the world and enjoy myself to being, now I'm an old person. Like, is there a basketball version of that for LeBron? Is it going to be a massive cliff? I don't think anybody can say for sure. It's impossible to know. I mean, 2 nights ago, he jumped over Paul George.
I was going to say, I don't think that cliff is there yet. And if the cliff comes, he might jump across that cliff. At this rate.
Yeah, which is crazy. So, like, I mean, do you build a roster planning around do you have if you're the Lakers and you run the Lakers, you have a 2-year plan in some version. That plan probably includes a 41-year-old LeBron James with like 41,000 career points as part of your plan. Like, it's unprecedented. There's no playbook for this. I mean, you can kind of look to like Tom Brady in the way that was handled, like in New England.
That's an entirely different sport. He doesn't play defense, for example.
It's so different. Yeah. Well, I mean, LeBron like picks and chooses his times to play defense too.
Fair enough.
But like, I think like, that is again like part of the issue is that like we know LeBron like is trying to keep enough in his tank so that when the games matter, he's able to like exhaust himself. But if he has to exhaust himself now, and by the way, that's the biggest red flag about this Lakers season is that like he's playing pretty good offensive basketball, and AD has been like a destroyer of worlds, and they're a game under 500. Like, that's the flaggiest, I think, sort of issue. Is that like their players have played well, like their top guys, and even Austin Reeves has like offensively played well, and they're still not winning a lot of games. You start to ask yourselves like, all right, like, does the upgrade we get from putting an unprotected 29 first round pick into play get us where we need to be in? It's a different version of the situation the Raptors have found themselves in, but it is similarly, I think, like just full of like potential, like, potholes everywhere that are just like, the wrong decision's very easy to make.
Fair enough. Well, last thing, speaking of the Raptors, and we got like 2 minutes for this. You were just at Raptors shoot around. Did you see who was playing center? Who's playing center for us tonight? Let us know.
I saw there was a Boucher sighting. He was there.
Okay.
I saw him.
He exists. Yeah, Chris Boucher. Yeah. Okay.
There was another tall guy.
Another tall guy.
So ask me what was his. I'm sorry. My Raptors roster knowledge today is not where it needs to be.
Yeah.
Is there?
Was he? Hold on. Was he wearing a T-shirt? Is it a guy wearing a jersey with a T-shirt underneath, like a Norm Powell type?
Yes.
That's Jonte Porter. Yeah. No.
Oh, wait. Maybe it was Jonte Porter. I think it was Jonte Porter.
Okay, yeah. I think those are the only 2 options at center today for the Raptors, unless they manage to Uber Eats a player to the game and
I had a nice chat with Dennis Schroeder today.
Yeah, nice.
The purveyor of said freeze, and very happy in Toronto. Dennis Schroeder. I will say that.
That's good.
Family's happy. Yeah. Loves the organization. Is in a very good place. Is today Chris Boucher's birthday? I believe I heard RJ Barrett say that. Did I overhear that properly?
Is it Blake?
Nope.
It's not his birthday. All right.
It is his birthday on Thursday.
Oh,
Okay, almost.
okay.
Yeah.
So yeah, there was some birthday discussion between, I'm happy to report, between RJ Barrett, Emmanuel Quickley, and Chris Boucher. Like, guys, the chemistry off the charts with this new Raptors team.
Oh,
They're talking.
I like
They're
this.
talking pre-birthdays.
I like this. I have no idea how they're going to be guarding Anthony Davis tonight or LeBron. But the vibes are good, and it's tough. Jakob getting injured is a tough time for this, but
in a walking boot. I can also report in a walking boot.
No. That's tough.
There you guys go.
I thought you turned your mic off. I thought that's what that noise was.
The Raptors have been playing so well, and the Raptors have been like one of the healthiest teams all season too. So this is like a complete anomaly. But yeah, it just came at the worst time when you got to see AD one night and then Zubac. What was
dude, that guy, man?
Gilgeous-Alexander?
Yeah, Gilgeous-Alexander. Yeah.
Zubac.
Kareem
Abdul-Jabbar.
All right.
Love it.
These are all Larry Nance. These are all Larry Nance nicknames. Like the Zubac's like basketball reference, like nickname page.
Yeah.
Are all from Larry Nance. It's like what it happened like one night in Lakerdom, like in the dark days, 8 years ago or whatever, like during the rebuild, where Larry Nance just ripped through Zubac's nicknames.
Wow.
It's a real life moment.
That's a good story. Who actually comes up with who's the best teammates that comes up with the best nicknames in the league? But Dan, we gotta ask you that another time maybe. But enjoy the game tonight, and we gotta let you go.
Guys, enjoy Scotiabank Hockey Day coming up.
I will actually. I actually will be at a Leafs game this weekend. So thanks for joining us once again.
Take care, guys.
Dan Woike, always a blast, and Jakob Poeltl in a walking boot at shoot around today. So I mean, we probably could have guessed that from the multi-week timeline we're dealing with here. So let's figure it out. Time now for Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance. Jakob Poeltl is out for a couple weeks here.
Yeah.
Otto Porter is doubtful. Christian Koloko remains out. Grady Dick is with the 905, who also played tonight. On the Lakers side, LeBron's questionable and Anthony Davis is probable. They're always questionable and probable.
Yeah.
They're still without Gabe Vincent. Rui is doubtful. So a little bit on the Lakers side, but much more on the Raptors side. The Raptors are 4.5-point underdogs, over under 235.5. Man, what are you doing with Jakob out?
Yeah, we had this discussion during the break. I think the Raptors should try to start at least a little bit bigger. So I suppose in this case, I'd probably promote Boucher rather than Jonte. I would have, unfortunately, Scotty's got to play center because he's the biggest guy in the group. But then you at least have Chris Boucher's like help defense to some degree.
And then McDaniels kind of moves into the Boucher spot off the bench.
Probably. The thing that's difficult about this is now you have nobody to guard LeBron. Like, is Pascal supposed to guard LeBron? Is RJ Barrett supposed to guard LeBron?
I mean, I think the move, you'd probably put Boucher on like Cam Reddish then, and let Siakam and Scotty Barnes try to, switch LeBron and AD stuff. I don't know. It's tough, man. There aren't like, they also start Austin Reeves and Taurean Prince, so it's not like their three perimeter players are going to kill you, but it's LeBron James and Anthony Davis. It's going to be tough even with centers.
Yeah, so but I think the back pocket is you probably have to play a lot of zone, which Miami did do to beat the Lakers, and also you probably need to really outgun them and like outshoot them from three. And honestly, I know that's like a big ask for the Raptors, but the Lakers are not a good three-point shooting team.
And you can
the
run.
Raptors are probably actually better three-point.
You can run. They're a good defensive team, but you can, like we talked about earlier, their strength is in transition offense right now. That was Between the Lines, brought to you by Bet Rivers. Take a chance.
There you go. Jakob, we miss you, man. After all the slander, all season, all the criticism of you, Jakob, we miss you, buddy. One game without you is already going to be too much. But anyway, that does it for us today. I've been your host, Will. You've been listening to The Raptor Show on the Sportsnet Radio Network. Make sure you find The Raptor Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe. And please rate and review the show. Thanks once again to Michael Grange, Andrew Schlecht, Dan Woike, producer and co-host Alex Wong, Blake Murphy, board producer Derek Rendale, Jennifer Rolnick, David Sis, Jared Manatad. We will be back tomorrow.